Obviously, the metaverse is a big topic at the moment. I think, obviously Facebook changing the name in October last year brought that to the forefront. But, I'll just describe it briefly. I mean, the metaverse is basically a virtual reality that's going to merge social media, augmented reality, virtual reality, and online gaming and cryptocurrency. So really, it's the next step of the internet, and it's going to provide an interconnected and decentralized environment for us. I've been doing a little bit of reading of late. I'm struggling a little bit with how, in a sense, the metaverse will help hotels, because when I think of hotels, we actually provide guests with an experience. But then by the same token, it brought me back to thinking about KODAK and how their original philosophy was, we help people capture memories. And when they invented the digital camera, they buried that. The person who invented it took it to his manager, they took it to higher up the management, and they showed them, and they're like, oh, if this gets out, then the film industry, which is where we make all our money, will be decimated. So please, hide that. If they had have considered that their core value was actually to help people capture moments, they would have actually continued on that. So it makes me think that the metaverse potentially has a place for hotels. What are your thoughts on the metaverse and NFTs, which are obviously, non-fungible tokens, which are how would you describe them? Really, a digital asset which can't be replicated, and they're recorded on blockchain, so that the buyer has proof of ownership. And I think I've heard, obviously, we could be using them for customer loyalty in the future in hotels, and heaven forbid we could be using them as room keys, jumping the need for mobile keys. So there's a lot happening in that space. How quickly do you think hotels will adopt? And it should I suppose a question in summary is it something that hotels should be looking at now to get a basic understanding, or should they be jumping on board?
It's a very interesting topic. That is definitely, there are a few buzzwords that you mentioned that everybody's talking about, that kind of the discussion has been mainly triggered by Facebook, renaming their company, because these things have existed for many years, but suddenly they became, everybody's the center of attention. It's an interesting story that you mentioned about KODAK. I think it's a similar story, the situation with Blockbuster and Netflix, kind of a similar lack of vision, I guess. Definitely, my personal opinion, this is the type of technology that is definitely is already very important to pay attention to, and there is a lot of potential for it in our lives, not just hospitality industry, but in our lives. But as we discussed in the beginning of this conversation, the reason why I named my book Hospitality 2.0, not 3.0, is because you understand why, right? We're just not there yet.
Yep.
The good news is that you probably don't remember the very first page of my book. There is a quote that the future is already here, it's just unevenly distributed. So I believe that there will be, always have been, and always will be players in our industry who will be ahead of the curve. And most likely those are going to be smaller companies, because it's just easier for them, and newer companies, clearly, because it's just easier for them to adapt to the evolution of technology and implement these new cool technologies for their use cases. But there are actually quite a few very interesting areas of application of these things that you mentioned: blockchain, metaverse, AR, VR, XR, all those buzzwords that are used right now. I wouldn't concentrate just on, the use case of staying at the hotel. I don't think that's going away. People will still travel and stay at hotels. It's still going to be needed, just helps build memories. But there are many use cases in our industry outside of just, typical hotel stay, where this technology might definitely help. Kind of the main area is meeting and events. These technologies have been penetrating this aspect of our industry for quite a few years now. Again, this technology is not new. It wasn't built yesterday. It's been years since we started adopting it. And the so-called hybrid events are very popular now, where people who prefer to be in person, which I'm one of them, I prefer to go to this meeting and interact with people and build meaningful connections, because I have converted myself from an introvert to an extrovert, and I finally learned how to speak to people from speaking to just my computer. So people like me, they will embrace in-person communications, and they will get on the plane and travel 18 hours to Bangkok to a conference. But there will also be people, and have always been, who either are unable to attend, or they don't have enough funds, or their companies are not allowing and they're not covering the budget, or whatever reasons. So that use case, I think, is going to be more and more prominent. I don't think, just like with any other technology, it's not going to replace what we have already. It's going to add and build on top of what we've had in terms of, in-person experiences. It's just going to complement it. Other use cases are in training, how we train employees. There are different ways of using this technology to communicate the knowledge to new hires, instead of having humans do it all the time now, because we don't have any humans to do it anymore. In education, how we educate our students, and how we teach people in the industry, how we, again, communicate knowledge to them. In engagement of travelers before their stay, they would be able to walk through the hotel and see where the pool is, see where the meeting room is. This is where the front desk is going to be. Or if it's a meeting planner, they will be able to see the plan of the building and understand, okay, where the guests are going to be coming through. So those are just some example of the use cases. And blockchain technology, one of the use cases I think that is very exciting to me, is allowing us to manage the data privacy situation and the transfer of personal data from the consumer to the building or to the business. Sharing that data between the consumer, the traveler, and the hotel. And also from the other aspect is sharing ARI data from the business to the consumer and to intermediaries. And that's the ARI data sharing right now is a big problem in the industry, and a lot of it is manual file data processing, especially when it comes to GDS technologies. They're very old. So there are companies that are already offering solutions that will completely modernize and reinvent this ARI data sharing between hotels, businesses, and the end consumer, the traveler, without having to do this heavy lifting of data file processing. So I think that's where that technology will help us decentralize that data to solve the data privacy issue. Again, many wonderful, amazing, promising use cases out there. However, with this small amount of industry is going to adopt them. In the beginning, we're going to go through this evolution curve, technology adoption curve, which looks like this inverted U shape, whatever you call it.
Bell curve.
The bell curve thing. It's going to happen gradually. There will be early adopters. There are already companies that are successfully doing that in our space. Majority of the industry will be lagging behind, and hopefully they will start with adopting cloud solutions, getting rid of their DOS-based PMS, and then moving on to using AI, ML, and then maybe someday, if they don't go out of business and by being disrupted, maybe they will implement AR, VR, blockchain, and Metaverse, and other wonderful things that we're discussing.
That's true. We do need to learn to crawl before we start walking. So
exactly. Before we use the Tesla, we have to learn to crawl.
Yes, that's right.
We're not even talking about bicycle right now. We're talking about crawling.
That's right.